Recording. Hello everyone, well thank you very much for joining us today. Today I'm sharing screen with you and I'm picking up from where we were last week. This is session number 7 and we're looking in particular at creating a safe environment for your skater. Last week we looked at the aim and the step models, and this week we're actually going to be looking at the implications for talent identification policies and the environment that you're creating for your skaters. So by the end of today's session, I really want to be able to look at what you consider to be an appropriate talent identification policy. And I think this section of the work is extremely important. And I'll just go to this section here, which is the module that this comes from. You're actually creating a safe environment for your skater comes within the SQA outcomes 2, and it's creating a session plan, and particularly for outcome 4, which is actually safely organising and delivering supervised skating sessions. So this is really getting into the meat of what you actually do as a coach. And in terms of the Zoom sessions, it's got a particularly really important aspect on the setting up of the activity and creating the positive learning environment. And this is the section that we're on just now. I'll just go to this. And I'm going to go to what you're going to have to do by the end of this session and what your post-Zoom activities will be. And can you see these tasks that you've actually got to satisfy? Describe what makes an inclusive coaching environment. Describe what makes an equitable coaching environment. Describe how to positively manage participants' behaviour. Demonstrate ability to prepare safe sessions and demonstrate appropriate action to deal with identified hazards based on the level of risk. Now, what we're covering today is primarily these first two, the inclusion and the equitable coaching environments, and they are so fundamental. The talent identification system is fundamental to the way that many of the able-bodied coaching systems operate. However, inclusive skating doesn't have a talent identification policy at all, right? So one of the things that's going to happen, particularly when you go into the coaching environment, is that people will be expecting you, particularly if you're dealing with it within a coaching environment, to have a talent identification policy. Or if you're working with many of the clubs, they may well want you to have one. So what you've got to do is you've got to know what a talent identification policy is, understand the ramifications of it, and then you are going to be adults working as coaches in the future, and you will be making the decisions for yourself as to what you think is the environment that you want to coach within and for what purpose. And sometimes it might be appropriate, but it's good to know what the limitations are of the system and also what the implications are. Now, the inclusive skating, although we don't have a talent identification policy, we do have some policies that impact on it. So what we'll do once we get to the end of watching several of the videos is we will actually start to discuss particularly these different challenges that are actually part of the tasks for today, and looking at particularly what you actually think an inclusive coaching environment is and what makes it a fair environment. Okay, now I'm going to change the screen because what's very helpful about the I Coach Kids course is this is actually the section from the coaching videos, and I've actually uploaded all of these videos onto the YouTube, and we're actually going to sit and we're going to watch them now. At any point in time, if you want me to pause, I'm really happy to pause, but certainly at the end of each video, I will take the opportunity to have a couple of minutes of reflection, if that's okay with you. Okay, so this is the introductory one. And I'm going to go to full screen.
Advertising on YouTube helps me reach engaged customers like Jenna, who's been searching for landscapers on Google.
There we are.
Hey there, coach. Well done for completing chapters 1 and 2. Remember, this course is about becoming a child-centered coach. That is, providing what children need and want so they can enjoy a positive and developmental sport experience. In course 1, we introduced Andy Abraham's coach decision-making model. This is a very important tool to plan and make decisions in your coaching. The model is also known as the who, what, how model. In short, a coach must understand who they are coaching and what stage of development they're at. They also have to understand what it is they want to teach their participants. In other words, their coaching curriculum. And finally, they need an understanding of the how. What pedagogical tools and strategies they wish to use to facilitate and maximize learning. In this chapter, we're going to focus on the who. To do so, we will explore how children develop from a biopsychosocial perspective. What does this mean? Well, it means that we will put on our 4D goggles to fully appreciate the depth and breadth of child development. Through our work with the students and coaches, we have come to realize that many times we look at children as if they were a flat picture with very little depth. We've seen how most times coaches are able to assess the physical development of a child because it happens right in front of your eyes and it's easy to see. However, we've also noticed that other vital development areas like cognitive, social, and emotional tend to go unnoticed and are rarely factored in when planning seasons and sessions. We cannot allow that to happen. In course 1, we also introduced the SPEC model I developed a few years ago to help coaches understand the implications of child development across the social, physical, emotional, and social beings. Expanding on this model will be the main goal of this chapter. Children change a lot from 5 to 12 years of age, and they do so across all 4 beams of the SPEC model. It is paramount for coaches to get a grip of how this multidimensional development happens. Before we take a nosedive into each of the 4 beams of the SPEC model, let's have a look at some key ideas that should always be at the back of our mind when thinking about child development. 1, development is not linear. Children will take steps forward and steps back. We must be patient. 2, children develop at different paces in the 4 beams. That's why we have to look at each area separately and not base our coaching on just the more visible physical being. And 3, 2 children of the same chronological age may be poles apart in one or more of the beams because they may have a different biological or training age. That is, because they may be early or late maturers, or because they may have been training for longer. Okay, buckle up and enjoy the ride of child development. We have some of the best world experts to take you through it. Enjoy. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.
I'll just pause it there. Now, obviously, that is discussing children, but do bear in mind that in this course, I'm actually planning on you being able to coach able-bodied children as well as inclusive children. Okay, so apply all these principles because you want to be able to coach across a whole wide range of abilities. And we certainly, the course is intended to, well, it does meet both standards. It's already been vetted as doing that. So it meets the standard for the able-bodied, but it also meets the standard for working with people with additional needs. Many of the principles though are exactly the same because with the inclusive skaters, there's a whole range of different additional needs that may actually have a greater impact. So things like training age may have a greater impact because children may have been held back as a result of their not having access to training facilities or training opportunities because of the disability. The same thing applies to inclusive people as adults. They may be at different stages as well, and particularly with people that are inclusive, there is very often a delayed maturation, and very often you find that people with additional needs will continue developing a lot until they're 25. So sometimes they will still hit milestones, but they'll just hit them later than some of the able-bodied children. So it's not a race. And many of these policies will apply right across the age range, even beyond 25 as well. But nonetheless, let's carry on with this next section.
Hey there, coach. In MOOC 1, you learned about developing effective environments for children in sport. Creating the right environment lays the foundation for making sport a positive experience. And let's not forget that this is the most important job for children's coaches in clubs, schools, and community groups across the world. Children act, interact, and react differently to their environment at different ages and stages of development. Therefore, as coaches, we need to understand how children develop over time, but very importantly, we have to do so not only physically, but socially, emotionally, and cognitively too. This chapter will tell you all you need to know about the social development of children. Social development is about the way in which children learn to interact with each other and the world around them. For instance, how they are considerate and respectful with each other, how they show empathy with others, how they express their own emotions, how they learn and adhere to social rules like taking turns, sharing, playing together, or the capacity to peacefully resolve conflict. Social development is characterized by learning social skills. These social skills are age-related, but not age-dependent. This means that it depends more on each child's maturational stage rather than chronological age. However, we can generalize some key markers or milestones during key developmental stages. It is also important to understand that the key social players and relationships for the child will also vary during different stages. In broad terms, fostering social development for coaches has a lot to do with creating a caring and safe climate. Before we get into the specifics of each stage, here goes some general advice. 1. Always be a role model. Set a good example yourself in how you interact with them and other people like parents and referees. 2. Provide lots of opportunities for them to play and interact with each other. 3. Give children the chance to individually and collectively solve problems by themselves and celebrate their successes. 4. Play lots of games with children with changing turns and basic rules they have to follow. 5. Reward and praise children when they play nicely with others and when they're able to share toys or equipment. 6. Give compliments for a child's efforts and not only for their achievements. 7. Praise a child when they lose a game, but take it well. And 8. Make sure to be always attentive and step in if any aggressive behavior takes place. Okay, so after this general advice, let's now see what's important to know specifically in each developmental stage. Let's start with toddlers and preschool children of about 1 to 4 years of age. Guess what? The key here is to let them play. During infancy, up to 18 months, the main relationship infants form is with their primary caregiver. This is all based around the sense of trust they develop that their basic needs will be met. Between 18 months and 4 years of age, children's main relationships tend to be parents and extended family. If they attend nursery, they'll also start building relationships with carers and other children. At this stage, as they become more mobile and self-sufficient, they begin to explore the world around them. This will continue for the rest of their lives. As their autonomy increases to the primary school years, that's 5 to 11, children keep exploring the world and develop more initiative and courage. They increasingly begin to actively look for contact with others and to enjoy when others respond positively to them. Throughout this whole period, and mainly through play, children learn social skills, the rules of interaction, and become more self-confident. From a social development point of view, perhaps the most important thing to realize as a coach is that young children are very self-centered and cannot yet fully empathize with others. In other words, do not chastise or scold a child for appearing to be selfish or disconnected from the rest. That is just where the child is at, and your job is to support them get to the next stage. As children grow older, they can empathize with the feelings and opinions of others. As a result, they also learn to deal better with agreements, rules, and conflict. Another significant step forward for children during the primary school years is the increase in their capacity to stand up for themselves. As they meet more people and form wider networks, they become more self-confident and empathetic. But they also get better at holding their ground and expressing and controlling their emotions. This is not always a straight road, and coaches must be prepared to support children when the wheels come off emotionally in social situations. Finally, as children progress through adolescence, roughly from 11, 12 years of age onwards, the main focus of their relationships will be their peer group. Peers and role models are likely to influence adolescents the most, and they are likely to be preoccupied with how they appear to others. At this point, positive peer relationships are very important and should be promoted by parents and coaches. As the parents of teenagers amongst you will be very aware, children change dramatically during puberty. They discover other interests, make new friends, and generally expand their horizons and areas of interest. They will also become more critical of themselves, others, and also of their parents and coaches. Remember what we said about being a role model. Patience and positive modeling are of the essence at this stage. The development of social skills become even more important for adolescents. Young people want others to like them and become their friends. At the same time, adolescents have to learn to master respectful interactions while standing up for themselves, resolve arguments, and empathize with others. Remember that at this stage, young people are developing their identity and thus often create their own culture and image. Again, try not to be judgmental. We all went through that phase. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's wrap it up with some final recommendations. When working with very young children, make the most of their incredible imagination and engage them with the stories and fantasy scenarios. You can also use simple games where they have to learn to respect simple rules. As they get older and more confident, make sure to show them that you're also confident in what they can do and that you trust them. And make sure to give each child a lot of attention. Make them feel important. Finally, as they reach puberty and adolescence, let go and encourage them to find solutions and answers by themselves. Make sure to respect their feelings and boundaries and make an effort to understand who their peers are and what they're into. In other words, take time to know each child you coach and what makes them tick. It requires time and effort, but it will pay off big time. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.
Right. What did you think of that? What's the sort of like key thoughts from watching that section on social development? You can all take it in turns. Evie, what's your thoughts on it?
It's interesting because I always thought that the student would be progressing the whole time, but because of changes, like they're going through their adolescent years, they might, go backwards, and that's not on you or the student. It's just because of things happening in their life. So you've got to take that into account. Be patient.
Excellent. Finlay, what's your thoughts?
The same as Evie, but also, whenever I heard the word role model, after that, I kind of just opened my eyes a little bit to really think about just, be more self-aware of who you are around other people, and after that, be more positive towards everyone.
Yeah. Because when you're the coach, you're going to be the role model to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. Lucy?
I think it was good to see just that you don't treat everybody the same, and that people, although certain different ages, they go through different stages, that folk may not be at the same stage at the same time. It's important to look at the person individually and not just the group that's doing the sport.
Exactly. And with the inclusive skaters, sometimes they may have delayed social development. So just try to assess where you think they might be. And in the same way with the toddlers, for example, they've got like self-centered behavior. They're not being selfish, it's just where they are. So be forgiving, don't be judgmental, allow them, to develop. Wonderful thoughts, folks. Let's go on to the next one.
Hey coach, welcome back. My name is Dr. Stacey Emmons, and I'm a senior lecturer in sports coaching at Leeds Beckett University. I'm also an athletic development coach for the English Football Association and the England Women's Rugby League national team. The previous video summarised how children develop from a social perspective. This video will outline the various stages of physical development that children go through, explore some important issues related to the process of physical maturation, and draw some key implications for coaches. Before we start, some key terms that are important to understand include what we mean by the terms youth, children, and adolescents. By children, we mean 2 to 10 years of age in girls and 2 to 11 years in boys. By adolescents, we mean the period from approximately 11 to 19 in girls and 12 to 19 in boys. And finally, by youth, we mean children and adolescents. Please note that adolescence is more difficult to define due to maturation. Other key terms to be aware of include growth, maturation, and development. Okay, so what is growth? Growth is an increase in the size of the body and its parts, and includes changes in height, body mass, fat, and the organs. There are 4 main types of growth which occur in the body. These are 1, general growth. This includes changes in the size of the body and its parts, and includes areas such as height and heart size. 2, neural growth. This relates to changes in the size of the head and the brain. 3, genital growth. This refers to changes in the reproductive organs. And 4, lymphoid growth. This is related to the changes in the lymphoid system, such as the glands, the appendix, and the tonsils. The main 2 types of growth we'll focus upon here are general growth and neural growth. General growth reflects the external, e.g. height, and internal, heart and lungs, growth that occurs in the body. For a coach, the 2 most important types are height and mass. Height and mass increase rapidly in the first few years of life, and then they plateau off. There's then a steady period of growth until the growth spurt, which we'll focus upon later. Have a look at the growth charts for typical sizes of boys and girls. It's very important, however, to be aware of the differences in size of boys and girls of the same age. For example, an 8-year-old girl can normally vary between 115 and 151 centimeters, and a boy can vary between 120 to 152 centimeters. In addition, children do develop slightly differently depending on their gender, but there's more variation amongst girls and boys than there is between them. Very importantly, every child is unique and will develop at his or her own pace. Therefore, it is recommended that a child's growth is monitored approximately every 3 months. In the prepubertal period until 9 to 10 years of age, gender differences are relatively small. However, around the age of 10 or 11, girls will generally experience a growth spurt before boys do and are thus taller. This is due to the earlier onset of puberty in girls. However, by the age of 14 or 15, boys have usually outgrown girls. This accelerated period of growth that children experience with the onset of puberty is often referred to as the growth spurt and will have an impact upon the physical capabilities of participants within your session. During this accelerated period of growth, growth occurs distal to proximal. This means that hands and feet grow before the torso, which results in you having relatively long legs, which can impact upon their physical capabilities, such as motor coordination and spatial awareness. Therefore, children may appear clumsy and uncoordinated in their movements. We must consider this when designing activities within our sessions, and may even need to retrain and reinforce some of the fundamental movement skills, such as a squat, a lunge, skipping, running, which children will have first learned at a young age. Let's now move on to neural growth. Neural growth relates to growth of the head and the brain. You may have noticed that young children have relatively large heads. By the age of 8, the brain and head is approximately 90% of its adult size. This affects their balance and needs to be considered within your coaching. For example, this means children are able to control proximal parts of the body and bigger muscle groups earlier than distal and smaller muscle groups. For example, they will be able to kick, hit, or throw for distance, but less for placement, meaning that within your coaching, an emphasis should be placed on gross motor skill development before fine motor skill development. What this neural growth does allow is for the development of fundamental movement skills at these childhood years. See section 4.1 for more information in this area. Now that we understand growth a bit better, let's talk about maturation. This is important because growth is quite consistent and steady until we approach the maturity or growth spurt period. Maturation is the progress towards the adult state. There are 2 key stages to maturation. The first one is timing. Timing is the age when specific maturational events occur. For example, age of pubic hair appearance or age at maximum growth in height. The second one is tempo. Tempo is the rate at which maturation progresses. In other words, how quick or how slow someone passes through maturation. During the growth spurt, there are 2 key stages: peak height velocity and peak weight velocity. Peak height velocity refers to the maximum velocity of growth in stature and has been used as a key marker in relation to the developments in performance during this period. By contrast, peak weight velocity is a phase of development characterized by rapid increases in muscle mass as a result of increasing sex hormone concentrations. As we said earlier, girls generally go through their growth spurt around the ages of 11 to 12, while boys experience a growth spurt slightly later, around the ages of 13 to 14 years. It's after this growth spurt that we start to see significant differences in the physical capabilities of boys and girls. This is because of the changes in the body that occur during this period. Boys tend to have an increase in lean muscle mass due to the increase in the hormone testosterone, while girls generally experience an increase in fat mass due to the increase in female hormones, progesterone and estrogen. All in all, these accelerated periods of growth will impact upon children's coordination and spatial awareness. Therefore, they may appear clumsy and awkward in their movement. We also often see considerable variation in the growth and maturation rates among participants. with use of the same chronological age differing dramatically in their biological maturity. Consequently, this means we may have children with very different physical capabilities within the same group when coaching. We therefore need to consider how we may adapt our sessions to challenge both the early and the late maturer. So what are the key take-home messages for you to consider in your coaching? 1, height and mass increases rapidly in the first years of life and then plateaus off. There is then a steady period of growth until the growth spurt. During this period, children are ready to learn fundamental movement skills, and these should be emphasized within your coaching sessions. 2, children do develop slightly differently depending on their gender, but there's more variation amongst girls and boys than there is between them. It is recommended growth is monitored approximately every 3 months, so you can adapt your training accordingly. 3, with the onset of puberty, children experience a growth spurt, which may make them appear clumsy and uncoordinated in their movements, referred to as adolescent awkwardness. And finally, 4, during the growth spurt, we may need to retrain and reinforce some of the fundamental movement skills, such as a squat, lunge, skips, and running, which children will have first learned at a young age, but seem to lose at this point. Now it's time for you to think about how this plays out in your coaching context. Please move on to the reflective activities and remember to download the study guide for further information. See you soon.
By advertising on YouTube, I catch the eye of my ideal customers at the right time.
Right. What's your take-home thoughts on that section of work? Can we start with Lucy this time and then do Finlay and Evie to spread out the responsibility a little bit more? Lucy, do you want to go first?
I think for me, it was when she was talking about the growth and you may need to reintroduce fundamentals that you taught earlier. And it was quite interesting to see that the development stages for genders is different. You would just think, oh, a 10-year-old has the same for boys and girls, but it's not. It's clearly not because she said that. But it's good to see it, and it's good to notice that you need to reintroduce skills again when people are branded as maybe clumsy. It's not. It's just them trying to figure themselves out again.
Exactly.
So that was quite interesting.
Exactly. And if they're getting things wrong that they had learned before, you don't tell them off about it. You know, try to be supportive because it's just the stage that they're at. You know. Finlay, what about yourself?
I think as children grow and after that they go through adolescence, I think as you grow, you're trying to figure out or try to like relearn some basic skills or basic exercises. And also, even if children are in the same age bracket, their builds can be significantly different to others.
Exactly. Really, really good. Evie?
Yeah, well, mine was the same, pretty much kind of going back over things you've already learned and reteaching and kind of just staying with your student and always being understanding.
Yeah, exactly. Because when they're going through that stage, you might be frustrated because you were like planning that you were going to be onto like, you know, double axel, and then all of a sudden you're having to reteach the axle. Completely understandable if they've gone through a great big growth spurt. One of the things that I advised my own skaters to do, and I advise people that are, you know, are our skaters, is measure the height regularly. And if you get them to do it themselves and then say to them, you know, warn me when you're going through a growth spurt, so that you take it into account, and it can have huge implications on things like Osgood-Schlatter's disease in the knees. Because if you know that, for example, someone's got a tendency to Osgood-Schlatter's and you know that they've just gone through a bit of a growth spurt, you might reduce the training load. So monitoring growth can be really helpful in how you actually design the training program. Right, let's go on to the next one.
Welcome back, Coach. How are you finding the course so far? In previous videos, we've explored social and physical development and their implications for coaching. Now we turn to another very important area, emotional development. Emotional development describes the way in which children increasingly experience their emotions consciously and are able to manage and control them. Children's emotional development has a strong connection with their social development, which we looked at in section 3.1. This is because emotions play a very important role in our interactions with others and in our ability to adapt to the environment. In short, emotional development is characterized by a growing awareness of the self, language acquisition, and the understanding and control of emotions. Children must learn to see, understand, and deal with their own feelings and the feelings of others in order to be able to act in a socially competent way. Some key markers of good emotional development are self-control, perseverance in the face of difficulty, being able to identify and written rules in social settings, being able to read the emotional climate of a situation, and being a good listener. From the perspective of the coach, fostering emotional development is very much connected to the idea of creating a caring climate. For example, by comparison to infants, preschoolers have a growing degree of control over their emotions. This helps them put into words how they feel. They're also able to learn what behaviors and emotions are considered appropriate in different situations. Moreover, because preschoolers have already understood that they are separate from the world around them, they are starting to see things from someone else's perspective. This is the origin of empathy. At this stage, coaches can do a number of things to promote emotional development. For example, 1, set a good example. Be a role model. Remember, children learn as much by observation and imitation as explanation. 2, let children know explicitly that you like them and that you enjoy your time with them. 3, praise them when they do something well. 4, be consistent in your responses. Your stability and dependability will be contagious. And 5, use certain opportunities to talk about feelings, both their own and those of others. Say, for example, you are happy with that new game, aren't you? Or, look, your teammate is sad because she's lost the ball. Can you try to cheer her up? By the time children go to school and until 11 years of age, they start to develop what are called learned emotions. For instance, shame and pride. These emotions are regarded as learned because they are very culturally determined. At this age, children also discover that they can experience multiple emotions simultaneously. Some of these emotions may even be conflicting, like happiness and disappointment, but children may find it difficult to separate them. Importantly, during this period, children will often try to determine how far they can push and where the boundaries are. In addition to what we said for preschoolers, during the primary school years, a coach can do a number of things to stimulate emotional growth. For example, 1, set some clear rules and tell them why they are important to be followed. It may help to develop these rules together with the children so they feel they own them. 2, set clear limits in relation to things like bullying and other transgressive or aggressive behaviors. You may even want to have discussions with the children where they can try to explain why these limits are important. 3, as counterintuitive as it sounds, sometimes it helps to ignore poor behavior, so the child realizes that it does not get them any attention. And 4, as we always say, try to give each child your full individual attention every session. Okay, so what about adolescents? Well, adolescence need not be a period of storm and stress if we understand a bit more what is going on within the adolescent body and mind. In general, adolescents are very aware of their own emotions and the emotions of others, and they have an extensive vocabulary to describe them. During this period, their emotional regulation is developing, and therefore they are progressively more capable of influencing their own emotional states. At this stage, they're also becoming more able to interpret different situations and react with appropriate behaviors and emotions. During adolescence, concerns about physical changes can be a source of worry and heightened emotions. In addition, the increased production of hormones also affects moods and general emotional responses. If you work with teenagers, you will realize that strong and sudden mood swings are not uncommon. Young people can behave unpredictably, and they will regularly oppose the authority of family members, teachers, and coaches. This doesn't mean they're bad people. So what can we do as coaches to promote emotional development at this stage? Here we go. 1, show them how much you care and that you're there for them as a person, not only as an athlete. 2, tell them that you are proud of how well they try to do their best. 3, help them explore their own behaviors and emotions by holding them accountable and helping them explain why they behaved or felt in a certain way. 4, ask them what motivates or worries them. Adolescents are probably more concerned with their own environment and peer group than with the sport performance. 5, stay calm during mood swings. Be a positive role model and let it go away. And finally, 6, anticipate that they will challenge you and argue, and that this is relatively normal behavior. Again, stay calm and reason with them. Whatever you do, don't make it personal. Okay, there you have it. Hope this is useful. In the next video, we will look at the cognitive development of children and what it means for you as a coach. Thanks for watching and see you soon.
Didn't get an ad that time. That was great. Right, what was your take-home messages from that one, which actually I think is probably more important for the inclusive skaters? So share what you thought about that one, and then if you could also think about the impact for the inclusive skaters, that'd be really helpful. Could we take it in terms of Finlay? Could you go first this time, and then Evie, and then Lucy, just to sort of like break it up?
I think it's quite a hard subject, but I think helping children, whether it's children or adolescents, understand their emotions is really important. And also going back to the first part of like being a good role model, I think helps and influences a lot on emotions.
Yeah, yep, good one. Evie?
Yeah, I'm kind of same as with Finlay, because the inclusive skaters might learn to kind of hide their sort of emotions and what they're feeling better. And as a coach, you've got to be kind of aware of this, so you can kind of help them subtly to still make them feel included.
Yeah, good. And Lucy?
Yeah, just agree with the other guys. Just as he was saying, read the situation and see the behaviours of the individuals. And although you're teaching a sport, the same sport to different people, you've got to take their situation into account and act on their behaviours and treat everybody individually.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was very sort of instructive to see the different stages so well, described, because with the inclusive skaters, what you may find very often is that emotionally, there might still be, preschoolers, even though you might be dealing with a grown-up person. So I think it's really important to, when you're evaluating your skater, to actually take on board, where do I think this person is emotionally and socially in terms of their development, and act accordingly, because they might be at the stage of having sort of like very simple interactions with very simple rules. They might still be learning how to control their emotions. And if they're at that stage and they express bad behavior, as it might otherwise be described, it might not be bad behavior. It might just be that that's where they are. So you're going to have to manage what may appear to be bad behavior, but it's just reflective of where they are emotionally in terms of their development. Okay, right, let's have a look at the next one.
Hello, Coach. It's great to see you. In this video, we are going to talk about cognitive development. Before getting into talking about cognitive development, however, a quick recap. In previous videos, we have described how you can understand children through social, physical, and emotional concepts. These videos have simplified the research about how children grow and develop, and how knowing this can impact on your coaching practice. However, it is important to also acknowledge that children and young people do not present in these neat box concepts. Hopefully you'll note we are trying to help you see these connections by offering coaching ideas that are similar across the videos. So, what do we mean by the term cognitive development? To answer this question, we should probably talk about cognition before we talk about cognitive development. Cognition relates to how we think about the world and about how we operate in it. We might talk about thinking, problem solving, forming judgments, decision-making, learning. We hope you would agree these are all crucial elements of how children can engage and develop through sport. Cognitive development, therefore, relates to how children develop their capacity to do each of these things. This development can be through practice, but it can also be simply through the brain maturing due to biological changes. The good news is that an awareness of these developments can support our coaching of children through good planning, delivery, and reflection. However, awareness can also help us help ourselves. Children and young people can often drive us to confusion and distraction. Knowing why can help us retain a sense of perspective, understanding, and crucially, patience. There is one component to cognitive development that I'm going to share with you today. This is known as working memory. Gaining an understanding of this concept has real implications for how we work with children and young people. Before talking about working memory, I would just like to reinforce the idea that has been consistent across these I Coach Kids videos. Children develop at different rates, and big changes can happen in relatively short periods of time. So, your player born at the beginning of the school year will typically be more cognitively mature than your player born at the end of the school year, sometimes much more so. The implication here is to avoid what often feels natural, and we start comparing children with each other. We can reach really inappropriate conclusions about the younger child being immature or difficult by doing so. We absolutely need to treat each child based on who they are rather than who they are not. So, back to working memory. Broadly speaking, we all have a limited capacity of ideas that we can work with at any one time. The classic idea is around 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. Because of this limitation, the brain learns to compensate by creating chunks of information or rules of thumb that create shortcuts and reduces the information that we have to work with. Just think about how we store phone numbers. A key implication, therefore, is to avoid saying too much in instructions or team talks. Also, to try and find ways to capture key ideas in short statements. For example, in rugby, passing backwards often feels counterintuitive for children. We could use lots of instructions to get this principle across. Alternatively, we could simply instruct the people without the ball to make sure the person with the ball is always in front of them. This rule of thumb captures lots of ideas in one short statement. The second important element about working memory is that capacity seems to increase with age up until about 11 or 12. That is, we don't start with a capacity of 7 plus or minus 2. Young children may only have a capacity of 2. In other words, if we ask young children to think about more than 2 or 3 things, they will very quickly get confused. Hopefully the implication here is clear. The younger the child we work with, the less information they can deal with. Keep it simple, coach. A really interesting bit of research I want to share with you now was carried out by Tim Buzzard. Tim and his colleagues found that the size of a child's working memory, they described this as either being higher or lower, impacted on how they dealt with 5 instructions for shooting a basketball. Their results showed that children with higher working memory improved following instructions. Perhaps no surprise there. However, those with lower working memory actually got worse. Yes, coaching may have actually made children get worse. So by implication, does this now mean that we should measure children's working memory capacity? Does it mean that we should go instruction heavy for those children with higher working memory? Not quite. It does mean that we should learn to know our athletes and individualize our coaching towards them. Who are the children who cope and work well with instructions or questions? Who are the children who seem to get easily confused and struggle with instructions? For those who cope, we can perhaps be a bit more challenging. For those who struggle, we simplify, perhaps through demonstration or offer less detail, although this is generally just good advice for everyone. But remember, working memory will change with maturation. Understanding will also improve. Both can help children cope with more information. So keep checking for changes in your player and don't put them into boxes that you never take them out of again. The final piece of advice relating to memory returns to chunking. The way our memory works with chunking is by making connections between bits of information. This has really important implications for coaches. If we can find connections with what we would like to coach and what children know, we can use those connections to good effect. Firstly, the ideas we present to children mean more because they already know something about what we are talking to them about. Secondly, it allows immediate chunking, meaning there is less demand on working memory. This frees up space to engage with the tasks that we as coaches give them. Analogies, examples, and metaphors are all ways of doing this. Starting an instruction with, "This is a bit like," or "Do you remember?" or "Have you seen?" can all help make those connections with children and young people. Ultimately, all of the coaching implications I've offered here all come back to one core message. Take time to get to know your players and acknowledge their differences. This will help you work with them as individuals. We hope all these videos around child growth and development will help you in this process. Good luck, and we'll see you soon.
I think, yeah, we're just about at the end. Right, what was the key takeaways for you on that particular session? Lucy, you can go first this time.
I think for me, it was just that the amount of information that individuals can hold at certain ages, and just that, though you want them to do so many certain things, just taking a back seat and saying, try this, then do this, then do this, is better than saying, right, we're going to do all this. And it might panic and they might not remember. You're better just breaking it down and working your way up.
There was some really interesting research done on the top coaches at the amount of communications that they employed. And the consistent finding was that the top coaches spoke the least amount of words. And 98% of the communications were technical. 2% were positive praise and supportive behaviours. So they chose their words very, very carefully. And it was very, very task focused. And then at any time providing support, there was nothing negative at all. It was a really interesting one. Finlay, would you like to go next? What's your thoughts?
I think being able to simplify instructions is really important, and also being able to figure out the most efficient way to say something that doesn't overwhelm someone.
Yeah, exactly. Really good point. Evie, what would you like to add to that?
I learned that you can't sort of compare your students. You can't look at all your students as like a whole. You have to look at them all individually for them all to achieve their best sort of potential at skating, whether they're like with inclusive skating or if they're not, because you know they're all the same. They're all going to be going through similar things.
Exactly. And particularly when you bear in mind that the sheer variability in the inclusive skaters. Now, do you remember at the beginning of the session, I mentioned the fact that we wanted to have implications for our talent identification policy. Now, I've shared the whiteboard. Could you put on what type of talent identification policy do you want to have for your coaching? I love that one, Evie. To be inclusive and understanding towards children, because I'm hoping that you've got an understanding of what an inclusive coaching environment is. And so to have that as your key policy, that's wonderful. Well done, Evie. Superb one.
Thank you.
Oh,
right. Yeah, just move that around. Finley, that yours to understand the individuals emotionally and physically. That's a fantastic one as well. And is it possible for you to move yours up a little bit, Lucy? Or I'm not sure that I can do it. If it's got a box around it, you might be able to click on the sort of like the thing and just move it up slightly.
I'll just retype it. I don't think it'll let you move it once it's on.
Right, looking at each skater individually and taking the time to see them as an individual and not just the sport. Oh, great one. Yeah, you've got to put that so that that can be clearly seen. That's fantastic. And then once you've got that done, I'd quite like you to take a screenshot of it and then to think about that, particularly as you then go into designing your own coaching sessions. Oh, that's fantastic. Really, really good. Just wondering if... No, I can't move it around. Yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, screenshot that so that you've got that for your records for today's session. Awesome, brilliant work. Did you enjoy today's session?
Yeah.
Great, well done. You're doing absolutely fantastic. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care, or Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
bye.
Bye. Bye. Hi, Lucy. Do you want to screenshot that before you go? Yeah.